You have never once been lazy. You have patient. You have loyal. You have been humble, careful, fair. Every single virtue they ever told you to build. And every one of those virtues has been quietly bankrupting you, year after year, without ever once feeling like a mistake. Nearly 500 years ago, one exiled strategist wrote down, in brutal detail, exactly how good people stay poor. On purpose, by design, one polite decision at a time. Stay until the end, because you will recognize yourself in at least 3 of what's coming, and one of them is going to make you angry. He didn't write any of this from a palace. He wrote it from a farmhouse after losing everything: his office, his income, his seat at the table where the actual decisions of his city got made. Before that fall, he'd spent years inside the machine, watching power up close from both sides. Who kept it, who lost it, and why the losers almost always lost it for reasons that sounded noble right up until the moment they didn't. Not because they were foolish men, because they were good, in exactly the ways that made them easy to outmaneuver. He didn't set out to write cynicism. He set out to write down what was actually happening in front of him, stripped of the flattering version everyone else too polite to say out loud. That's the lens for everything that follows, not a list of hacks. A pattern he watched repeat for years, the same pattern that's still repeating, right now in your life, whether you've noticed it or not. Picture the room he was actually writing about. Councils full of decent, capable men who lost their cities not to stronger armies, but to their own hesitation, their own excessive trust, their own refusal to look ruthless, even when ruthless was the only thing that would have worked. He watched patience get mistaken for wisdom and loyalty get mistaken for safety, over and over, right up until the moment those same men were removed from power by someone who simply hadn't made the same mistake. He wasn't ting a theory. He was taking notes on a live autopsy, and the traps he documented then are almost identical, feature for feature, to the ones quietly running your life today. Here's the first one, and it's probably running today, this week, in something you've already decided to put off. You tell yourself you're being smart. You're waiting for the right moment. A little more savings, a little more certainty, one more piece of proof that it'll actually work before you commit to anything real. You've rehearsed the pitch, the plan, the pivot 100 times in the shower, in the car, at 2 in the morning when you should be asleep, and every single time you get close to actually acting, some quiet, reasonable-sounding voice tells you it isn't quite time yet. 6 months pass like that. Then, Then you stop counting, because counting would mean admitting exactly how long almost ready has actually lasted. And that number is more humiliating than you want to look at directly. That voice has a name, and it isn't wisdom. It's the waiting trap. Patience wearing the costume of prudence, dressed so convincingly that you'd defend it if someone else called it what it actually is: fear with better posture. Someone else in roughly your position, with less experience and a rougher, messier plan than yours, moved anyway. Not recklessly, just before they felt ready, because somewhere along the way they'd understood something you haven't let yourself believe yet. Readiness is a feeling, not a fact, and it never actually arrives on its own. It gets built after the first move in the doing, not before it in the thinking. 18 months later, they're running something real, something with customers or clients or momentum. You're still refining the deck. The plan is more polished than it's ever been. It has also never once left your laptop. He'd have recognized this instantly because he wrote about exactly this failure. He argued that fortune, luck, timing, the world's willingness to cooperate, only rewards the man bold enough to act before conditions are perfect, because the cautious man is always waiting for a permission that fortune was never actually going to grant him. The window doesn't open because you're finally fully ready. It closes while you're still getting ready, and it closes quietly, without an announcement, so you don't even notice until you look back and realize it's been shut for a year. So ask yourself, honestly, right now, is there something you've been calling not the right time for over a year? Because not a plan anymore. That's a hiding place with better lighting, and you built it yourself, one reasonable delay at a time. Maybe it's a business you keep researching instead of registering. Maybe it's a client you keep meaning to email once the website looks better, except the website had almost done for months. Notice the shape of that sentence. Once it's better, once I'm sure, once I've done a bit more research. Each one sounds like discipline. Stacked together over a year, they're just a very well-mannered way of never finding out what would have happened. And there's a specific, uncomfortable question buried in that. One we'll come back to before this is over. What exactly are you protecting yourself from finding out? Someone else spent 4 years at a company that was, by every honest metric, using them. Overworked, underpaid relative to the market, passed over twice for a promotion that went instead to someone with half their actual output, but far better timing in the right meetings. And still, when a genuinely better offer landed quietly in their inbox, they hesitated. Because leaving felt disloyal, and loyalty is supposed to be rewarded eventually. Isn't it? Eventually never came. 4 years came. The raise that was coming next cycle became a phrase they could recite in their sleep, word for word, in the exact same tone their manager used every time. And here's what you've probably been doing instead of ever asking whether that's true. Calling it loyalty when it was actually fear wearing a nicer name. Fear of being seen as grateful. Fear of starting over somewhere new. Fear that somewhere, invisibly, there's a scoreboard tracking your patience and paying out interest on it later. There isn't. Organizations don't remember loyalty the way people do. They remember leverage, who has it and who's too polite, or too grateful, or too afraid to actually use it. He wrote about this exact asymmetry directly. He believed the prince who builds his power on other people's gratitude is building on sand, because gratitude fades the second convenience, and the wiser man secures his position through what he actually controls, his own leverage, his own options, through what he hopes other people will eventually generously give back to him. Loyalty pointed upward in his world was almost always a bet the loyal one lost. If the version of you 6 years from now is still waiting for the recognition that was quietly promised 2 years ago, that's not devotion. That's a debt that was never going to be repaid. And for years, you've been the only one still keeping the books. Here's the small, practical insight worth carrying out of this one. Loyalty isn't the problem. Unreciprocated loyalty with no expiration date is. A useful test, if the same promise has been coming soon for more than one review cycle, it isn't a promise anymore. It's a placeholder someone else is using to keep you exactly where you already are, at no cost to them at all. Why do you undercharge for the exact thing you're actually good at? Not because you don't know your worth, you do the math in private. You know precisely what your time, your skill, your years of experience worth on the open market. You just can't bring yourself to say the number out loud, because asking for it feels like bragging. And somewhere along the way you were taught that good, humble people don't brag. So you round down. You throw in extras nobody asked for. You say whatever works for you when someone asks your rate. And then you watch someone with a fraction of your skill charge double for the same thing and get it, without a second of hesitation, without a single apology. That's the modesty trap. And it's brutal precisely because it looks like a virtue from every angle except the one that actually matters. Your bank balance at the end of the year. Someone else, doing work you could genuinely do better, simply names their price and moves on, unbothered, because they never once confused humility with self-erasure. Here's a small, practical fact worth sitting with. Over a single year, that gap between real confidence and quiet self-discount often equals an entire second income, sometimes low thousands, sometimes tens of thousands, sitting untouched in the space between what you're worth and what you were willing to say out loud in a single sentence. He understood that the appearance of a thing and the thing itself are rarely the same, and that a leader who mistakes modesty for virtue instantly by everyone around him as someone who genuinely doesn't know his own value. And the world will happily agree with that reading at a considerable discount. Undercharging isn't kindness. It's no kindness. It's a tax you volunteer to pay quietly every single time for the crime of being afraid to sound sure of yourself out loud. Notice the specific moment it happens. Next time you catch it, someone asks what you charge, and there's a half-second flinch before you answer. A tiny internal negotiation where you talk yourself down before the other person has said a single word. That flinch isn't humility. It's a habit, formed early, reinforced every single time it worked, and it will keep working exactly as long as you let it go unexamined. The first three of these cost you money you'll never see. What's coming next costs you time you can't buy back at any price. And left alone long enough, it starts costing you the actual version of yourself you were supposed to become. You call your careful. You've built an entire identity around being the responsible one, the one who reads the fine print twice, who keeps 6 months of expenses sitting in an account earning almost nothing, who has never once made a decision that couldn't be calmly defended at a dinner party full of strangers. And on paper, sounds like maturity. In practice, it means that every opportunity requiring a real decision, a real risk with a real uncomfortable downside, got quietly filed under not yet, then maybe later, then never mentioned again, not even to yourself. This is the caution trap, and it's more dangerous than the other two because it never once feels like avoidance while it's happening. It feels like the smart, adult, responsible choice. Right up until you're 45, looking back and realizing the last 2 decades were spent protecting a version of stability that was never actually growing underneath you. Here's the small insight worth keeping. Safety and stagnation often look identical from the inside. You only find out which one you had by trying to move and discovering whether anything moves with you. Someone else took the exact size of risk you talked yourself out of, invested real money in the thing, said yes to the opportunity that could fail publicly in front of people who'd remember, put real time behind an idea with no guarantee attached. Sometimes it did fail, loudly, visibly, embarrassingly. They kept moving anyway, because somewhere they'd understood that the downside of a bad bet is temporary and recoverable, while the downside of never betting at all is permanent and compounds in silence. 10 straight years of pure caution doesn't just fail to grow your money, it fails to grow you. He never once mistook caution for wisdom. He believed fortune favors the bold over the timid far more reliably than people want to admit, and that the world punishes hesitation more consistently than it ever punishes failure. Because failure, at least, teaches you something. Hesitation just waits and keeps waiting and calls the waiting a strategy. So look honestly at your last decade. Count the real risks you actually took. Not the ones you researched, not the ones you almost took, the ones you actually took. If that number is close to 0, that wasn't safety you were protecting. That was a 20-year-long refusal to find out what you were actually capable of. There's a version of you in that same responsible chair right now, weighing a decision that scares you a little, a course, an investment, a move, a conversation. Notice how the fear doesn't feel like fear. It feels like prudence, like doing your due diligence, like being the sensible one in the room. That feeling is not proof you're making the right call. It's just proof you're about to make the comfortable one, and comfortable and correct have never once been the same thing. Someone else stopped waiting to be discovered. Early on, they believed, the way you probably still believe quietly even now, that if you just did excellent work consistently and without complaint, someone with real power would eventually notice and reward it on its own. So they did the work. Excellent, uncelebrated, invisible work for years, expecting the system to eventually see them clearly and correct itself in their favor, the way a fair system is supposed to. It didn't. Someone louder, with noticeably worse output but far better positioning, kept getting the opportunities instead, over and over, in a pattern that should have been impossible to miss. And here's what you've probably been doing instead of admitting that plainly. Calling it unfairness, a temporary glitch that would sort itself out once the right people finally paid attention, instead of what it actually is, which is simply how positioning works in any system. Nobody is forcing to be fair. The someone else in this story eventually changed exactly one thing. They stopped being excellent only in private and started being visible on purpose, sharing the work instead of hiding it, claiming credit that was already rightfully theirs, standing near the rooms where real decisions got made instead of quietly waiting to be invited in. Within roughly 2 years, they were being offered the exact opportunities they'd technically qualified for, on paper, the entire time. He was explicit about this, more explicit than most people are comfortable with. The world rarely rewards what actually deserves it. It rewards what positions itself to be seen and taken. And a man who waits patiently for justice from a system with no obligation to deliver it will wait through his entire useful life and die still waiting. Merit was never the whole game. It was only ever the entry fee. The rest of the game by people who were willing to admit that early. This is the point where a lot of people quietly get angry at the idea instead of at the situation, because it feels safer to argue that the world should be fair than to accept that it isn't and act accordingly anyway. Both things can be true at once. It should be fair. It usually isn't. Waiting for the first thing to become reality before you act on the second one is exactly how quiet, excellent work turns into quiet, excellent obscurity. When was the last time you actually asked whether the thing you were working on mattered, instead of simply working harder on it? Be honest with yourself for a second. You measure your worth in hours logged, in an inbox at 0, in a calendar with no white space left anywhere in it. And somewhere along the way you quietly decided that exhaustion is proof of value, that if you're this tired, you must surely be doing something important. That's the busyness trap, and it might be the cleverest disguise on this entire list, because it doesn't look like avoidance at all. It looks like the exact opposite of laziness. But motion has never been the same thing as progress, and a full calendar is not the same thing as a life actually getting built. You can spend 60-hour weeks for 5 straight years, being extraordinarily busy inside a system that was never going to make you wealthy, no matter how flawlessly you performed inside it. Someone else worked visibly fewer hours and built noticeably more, because before doing anything at all, they spent real time asking what was actually worth doing, and then said no quickly and without much guilt to almost everything that wasn't that. He warned rulers against precisely this, mistaking constant motion for control. When a leader who's always reacting, always busy, always putting out the next small fire, has actually already lost the ability to plan anything at all. He's just performing effort instead of directing it towards something that matters. Busy is not a compliment you should keep giving yourself. Often, it's the exact evidence that you've quietly let other people's priorities fill every single hour you could have spent building your own. Try this, honestly, for 1 week. Before adding anything new to the calendar, ask whether it moves you toward the thing you actually say you want, or just makes tomorrow feel accounted for. Most people can't answer that question quickly, and that hesitation is the answer. It means the calendar has been driving for a while, and you've just been along for the ride, calling it commitment. Here's the one that's going to sting because it's sitting underneath every other one on this list. You've built your entire decision-making process as around one invisible, constant question. What will people think? Not just your boss, not just a client. Everyone. Family, friends, strangers online. The version of your parents that still lives in your head and quietly every choice before you've even finished making it. You run every real ambition through that filter first, and most of them don't survive the crossing. That's the approval trap, and it's the one none of the others could exist without. Waiting, loyalty, modesty, caution, quiet merit, constant busyness. Every single trap on this list is really just a costume this one wears to look more respectable. You weren't protecting your reputation all those years. You were letting other people's opinions cast the deciding vote on your own future. One polite, reasonable, well-liked decision at a time. Someone else made the choice that made people uncomfortable, left the safe path, said the unpopular thing out loud in the room where it counted, charged the number that felt aggressive the first time they said it, took the risk that would have made excellent dinner party conversation if it had failed. Some of the people around them disapproved loudly at first. Within a few years, most of that disapproval had quietly, almost sheepishly, turned into something else. People asking how they'd actually done it. He was blunt about this, more blunt than most modern advice ever dares to be. A ruler who needs to be loved by absolutely everyone will end up ruled by absolutely everyone, and the fear of disapproval is the single easiest lever anyone has ever found to control another person, because you'll hand them that lever yourself, freely, and call it good character while you do it. You don't actually have a work problem. You don't have a money problem, not fundamentally. You have an approval problem wearing 7 different outfits. And for years, it's been the one making every important decision in your life instead of you. Remember that question from earlier? What exactly you've been protecting yourself from finding out? Here it is, plainly. You weren't protecting yourself from failure. Failure is survivable, and some quiet part of you has always known that. You were protecting yourself from other people watching you fail, and then having an opinion about it. That's it. That's the whole mechanism underneath every trap on this list. And it's been running your life for free this entire time. Here's the part that should humble every single word of this video, including the ones you just heard. The man behind all of it didn't win. He lost his position entirely when the regime in his city changed. He was accused of conspiracy, imprisoned, and by most accounts tortured, for finally being released to a small, unremarkable farm outside the city. Cut off completely from the political life he'd spent his entire career studying up close. He spent his final years broke and irrelevant by his own standards, writing a book about exactly how power really works, largely as an extended job application to claw his way back into the rooms that had already shut him out. It didn't work. He died still on the outside, still uninvited, and that book wasn't even published until years after he was gone. He understood every single pattern in this video with total unflinching clarity, and understanding it didn't save him. Knowing the game has never once been the same thing as playing it well. You can watch this entire video, nod along at every point, recognize yourself in 3 of them exactly like you were promised at the start, and still change absolutely nothing, because insight without action is just a more sophisticated, more educated way of staying exactly where you already are. There's something almost cruel about that ending, and it's worth sitting in for a second instead of rushing past it. The man wrote the single most influential playbook on power in Western history, from a farmhouse, unemployed, largely ignored by the people he most wanted to reach. He wasn't punished for being wrong. He was, by most measures, right about almost everything he wrote. He was punished by the simple, unglamorous fact that writing the truth down and living by it are two completely different disciplines, and only one of them changes your actual life. So here's where all of this has to stop being theory and start being something you can actually use tonight. Not someday, not once you finally feel ready. First, tonight, send the message, the pitch, or the ask you've been quietly drafting in your head for weeks. Don't polish it any further. Send the unfinished, slightly awkward version, because one real no will teach you more in 5 honest minutes than another month of only imagining one. Second, tomorrow, put an actual price on something you've been giving away for free. Advice, time, a skill people already quietly lean on you for. Say the number once, out loud, to a real person, before you get the chance to talk yourself back down from it. Third, sometime this week, make one decision. A small one is completely fine, without asking anyone else for their opinion first. Not because other people's input is worthless, but because you need proof, however small, that your own judgment can stand on its own without a committee standing behind it. You were lazy. You were patient, loyal, humble, careful, fair, hardworking, and endlessly agreeable. And every single one of those, left unexamined, quietly cost you or time, or a version of your future you'll now never actually get to meet. That was never a character flaw. It was a pattern, roughly 500 years old, still running quietly in the background of your life, because nobody had ever pointed at it directly before and made you actually look. This channel isn't here to hand you affirmations or tell you to hustle harder. It's here to name the pattern, week after week, precisely enough that you can catch it running in real time instead of only recognizing it in hindsight, months or years too late, the way most people do. Not motivation, not vague permission, believe in yourself. A working map of the specific, well-disguised habits that quietly keep capable people small, drawn on who watched it happen up close 500 years before you were born and paid for that knowledge with the rest of his career. If that was useful to you, the next one's already waiting, and this time you'll catch yourself before you're 18 months deep into almost ready.